What's up, guys? Welcome to the second episode of Muscle Talk. I'm your host, Arash, Rahbar, and today I have my good friend and fellow bodybuilder, Chris Barakat. Chris has a bachelor's in athletic training and a master's in exercise science and nutrition. He's here today to talk about some topics that we discuss about, and we think you guys are going to enjoy very, very much. Chris is also a natural bodybuilder and a coach. So the two topics I chose to speak with Chris, and I'm very excited about, is the first one is hypertrophy. We pronounce it very differently. You guys can shim me into the comments and say who's pronouncing it correctly or not. We were debating about this earlier. Hypertrophy. What is hypertrophy and how do we get the most amount of muscle growth? That's what everybody wants to know. Is it high volume training? Is it low volume training? How do we go about it? What's the quickest way to put on the most amount of muscle? And the second topic, which is very dear to both of us, is Natty versus Enhanced. Natural bodybuilding versus enhanced bodybuilding, okay? Now, what we're going to discuss here is a lot of myths and a lot of questions you guys have. What natty bodybuilders can and cannot do, and what enhanced bodybuilders can and cannot do, and what both of these athletes benefit the most from. So without further ado, Chris, let's jump into the hypertrophy topic. Well, first and foremost, how you doing?
Good, man. Good. I appreciate you having me on. It's been a long time coming.
It's a pleasure. We've always chatted here and there, and I always respect Chris and his knowledge very, very much.
Thank you.
At the end of the day, if you guys want to be the best you, the best version of you, the best bodybuilder you can possibly be, you got to be a nerd. And Chris and I are big nerds in bodybuilding. Of course, we like to train, and it's a real intense, aggressive sport. There's some ego involved for sure, but at the end of the day, we do a lot of reading and a lot of research. Chris more so than me with his degrees under his belt, but it's a never-ending quest of learning what we can do to enhance ourselves, what we can do to progress at a faster rate, recover at a faster rate, grow at a faster rate. So for me, I'm 26 years into it now, and it's never ending. I'm always researching and asking questions and hitting up guys like Chris. Just because I'm an IFBB pro and I've been on that Olympia stage doesn't mean I know everything. It doesn't mean the learning process hasn't stopped for me. And I'm sure Chris feels the same way. So let's just jump right into it. Hypertrophy. What do you define hypertrophy as? And what do you think the best way to create more growth and more muscle mass is?
Sure. So muscle hypertrophy or hypertrophy, however you want to say it, essentially it can occur in two ways. A muscle could get essentially larger in diameter, or it can actually grow in parallel, so almost get longer. And therefore, when a muscle is flexed or contracted, if it became longer in series, in size, it's going to look denser. And obviously, if it grows in diameter and it gets thicker, it's also going to look denser. So muscle can grow in two different ways. And then there's also something called muscle hyperplasia that some people debate about whether it occurs or not in humans. It has been proven to occur in skeletal muscle tissue in things like birds and rats and stuff like that, and even cats, but hasn't been proven in humans just because we can't test it, because we can't count the muscle fibers until the person is dead. So that's a whole other story. But I do believe it occurs in humans. I think that's one reason why bodybuilders are bigger in size compared to very strong counterparts like powerlifters and stuff like that. But the primary mechanism that causes us to grow is mechanical tension. A lot of people have debated the importance of cell swelling, so getting a muscular pump, as well as creating damage, muscular damage, as being a component or a mechanism of hypertrophy. But the primary driver for muscle growth is clearly mechanical tension. And that can be created in a multitude of facets, right? You can look at someone like a gymnast. They have great physiques. They've developed a pretty solid amount of muscle, and that's because they're creating a lot of tension on their tissue, and they're training the muscle, they're activating the muscle. You can look at someone like a sprinter. They have very well-developed quads because they're activating a ton of motor units within their muscle. They're creating a lot of tension, and that's why they have very impressive legs and stuff like that. You can even look at some scientific data on things like electrical stimulation. for an untrained person that doesn't work out, that's still a higher level of stimulus than they're used to, and that causes growth alone, just activating the muscle, turning it on, getting it to contract.
Kind of like what Bruce Lee did, right?
Yeah.
Bruce Lee used to sit there typing, and he would have the electrodes on his chest, and he said it was like doing 200 sit-ups. But then people have said, well, that doesn't make you grow, because if we sat home, we wouldn't need to train. We'd just sit home and do that. So for
sure.
an inactive person, it will create muscle growth, but for us, it wouldn't do anything.
Absolutely. It wouldn't do anything for us unless we put on like a muscle that we don't train frequently, or we don't get a good contraction when we train because we have a poor mind-muscle connection or very poor execution. It might be able to help there. But in untrained population, there's actually research showing people wearing those electrical suits have built muscle and lost fat at the same time, just wearing the suit.
Wow.
But
is that the same wavelength as like stim you get when you go to therapy? Because there's that new machine that company's using. I know Max Charles has it. He wheels it around Bevs with him when he trains legs. You see it on Instagram a lot. It's New Fit or New Weight?
Yeah,
something.
I've heard of that too. I've seen.
But it's a different electrode and a different wavelength than the conventional stim machine that you buy on Amazon, or stim machine that they use in like therapy.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the stim machines in therapy. That's definitely not my expertise. We do have that here at the university. We have EMS suits, like full body suits, that we've ran studies on, not in bodybuilders, but in other population. And I mean, there's research supporting it. So it clearly works. And again, that's contracting the muscle. And what that causes is a chemical signaling process that at the cellular level does things like increases mTOR, increases muscle protein synthesis, and that's why there's growth. But I think a lot of people overcomplicate what causes muscle growth, right? Like when you and I first started training, if we took a 15-pound dumbbell and curled that 15-pound dumbbell, that caused us to grow when we were starting off. Yeah. That 15-pound dumbbell is no longer going to, it's no longer going to stimulate growth for us. And it's pretty simple. Like our body adapts to that stimulus we're providing it. And then how are we going to continue to adapt? We need to do more, right? And everyone's familiar with the concept of progressive overload. But I think where a lot of people go wrong is how to properly progressive overload and what progressive overload truly is. From the name itself, a lot of people think it's just lifting heavier weights, which it can be, but it's truly progressive tension overload. You need to create more tension. So, for example, if we take a 30-pound dumbbell and we execute it with shit form, we're not going to create more tension just because it's a 30-pound dumbbell compared to a 20-pound dumbbell with excellent form. So tension is super important, and execution is super important, but you need to progress over time.
Okay, just for argument's sake, right? That's what we're here to do. So is it safe to say that, because look, when I hear hypertrophy for like the past 20 years, it always, you're laughing at how I'm saying it, it always is paired with like 8 to 12 reps. That's how you create muscle growth. That's how you create hypertrophy. But is it safe to say, and this is kind of my belief, but I want to hear your take, that it's not the rep range. As long as you're creating a new keyword, new stimulus, a new form of trauma, a new load, a new angle, a new whatever it may be, a new stress on the muscle, which forces, in turn, will force the muscle to adapt, along with proper nutrition, pre and post-workout protein and carbohydrates to create protein synthesis. That's the definition, right? It was on, NCBI, PubMed.
Yeah, absolutely.
On that site, literally it said, intermittent and short-lived increase in muscle protein synthesis rates following resistance exercise sessions. That was their definition of hypertrophy.
Yeah.
So that's not talking about, you need to do, I've been hearing this from bodybuilders, amateur and pro, 20 years ago till today. No, you're not going to grow the muscle doing 4 to 6 reps or 5x5s.
Yeah.
You need to do 12 reps. Why are you laughing?
No, I totally agree with you. It's a common myth. It's a misconception.
Because when I was Natty and when I was training for like 10 years, I did 4 to 6 reps. I did what I call BFT training, blunt force trauma. That's my style of training. But the Metzner brothers, Mike Metzner, Dorian Yates. I looked up to Dorian. I followed him. It was a very low volume, keyword high intensity and heavy style of training. And I grew. I didn't do 12 reps. I did warm-up sets of like 10 to 15, but I trained low volume for like a good 8 to 10 years. And I got huge.
Yeah.
And now I apply that volume, that strength to higher volume.
Yeah.
So is there truth to that? I mean, that you don't need a certain rep range. It's about the nutrition with the intensity.
That's 1,000% true, man. I mean, what the research shows is growth occurs on a continuum of a very large rep range. You can do sets of 5 or you can do sets of 30. The important thing is that you're using a load that is close to failure, because what that does is it basically forces you to recruit more muscle fibers and it increases total muscle activation. So if you do a set of 5, right, at a 9 out of 10 intensity or 10 out of 10 intensity, you're going to activate all of your motor units for the most part within that muscle. So your muscle activation is going to be extremely high, even though you're doing 5 by 5. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, if you use a light load, you're only going to activate a large percent of your motor units and muscle fibers as you get very close to failure. So those first 5 reps of a set of 20 are ineffective. They're not going to do anything. Those second 10 reps are basically ineffective. Those third 10 reps, so those third 5 reps are ineffective. So 10 to 15, still ineffective. Once you get to that 15 to 20 range, and like 20 is your true failure point, you're increasing muscle activation as the set goes on, and you're increasing the stimulus to the muscle fiber, and therefore it's still going to be effective for growth, whether you do a set of 5 or a set of 20. That 8 to 12 rule became so popular from a lot of the old research, but the thing that is true behind it is it's likely the most efficient way to train, in regards to you're going to be using loads that are heavy enough to recruit a lot of muscle fiber, but not so heavy to have a higher injury risk, right? And also, they're not low enough where you have to do very high rep sets. So it's a very efficient way to train. But I personally think the best thing to do is to have some sets where you're focused on lower rep ranges, have some exercises where you're focused on that moderate rep range, and then do some metabolic work where you're doing higher rep, more pump work. So growth occurs on the continuum of the rep range, and that's been solidified in the data. It's extremely clear.
I completely agree with everything you said, and it's kind of sad that bodybuilding, as far as I know, is the only sport that has so many myths and misconceptions. And it's not like we're paving the way and we're doing these groundbreaking things. We have a lot more science, and we're blessed to have a lot more guys like you on our team. But the guys have been doing this for 50 years, 60 years. Arnold Schwarzenegger, and even before him, they've been doing it, but yet there's still so many mistakes being made. And I completely agree with what you said, the most efficient way. I think that especially the younger guys need to be training very, very heavy and intense. But the issue is, like, when I hear guys say, 4 to 6 reps doesn't work for me, when people say like everyone grows differently and different diets, I don't really take into that too much. You might work on a little higher carb and a little lower fat, and I might be the other way around. But at the end of the day, if you're a mammal, we're growing the same way. And heavyweight, high intensity, lower volume with lots of rest, in my opinion, is the best way to grow massive amounts of muscle, regardless if you're natural and enhanced. Mm-hmm. Hold on, guys. We're getting up to that part. I know they're all waiting for that.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. But the guys that come to me and say, well, I tried that high intensity, low volume, and I didn't grow. I need more volume. I think the thing is that they didn't have the mental or physical capability to train at that level. If you guys go watch Dorian Yates or even some of my videos with the real high intensity when I'm doing low volume, we look like lunatics before the set. Sometimes I'm biting down on a towel. It takes so much mental focus and so much just physical intensity to be able to do that. So I think it's a lot more efficient and a lot easier for the masses to do that 8 to 12. But if they can train with lower volume and heavier weight, I believe they're going to get more results quicker.
Yeah.
And the injury factor, absolutely. But, you know, there's been times where I thought, well, I'm doing 4 sets of 120-pound dumbbells for shoulders at 12, 15 reps. I can do that weight for. That's really taxing on me. If I'm going to do 130 or 140 pounds for less reps and less sets, as long as I'm warmed up and I'm training safely, it's less wear and tear. You know, so I think you're either doing a working set, you're doing a warm-up set, and you're doing a set, I call them priming sets, getting yourself ready for that, you know, getting your nervous system ready. You can't go from 135 to 315 on a bench. So if you're not doing one of those 3 things, you shouldn't be doing anything else. Whereas too many sets in the gym with guys are just the same weight they've been doing for the past 6 months or 6 years, so they're not growing.
So that's a mistake that I personally made, and that's probably the biggest change that I'm currently implementing in my training is the way I'm warming up to my actual working sets. I think in the past I did do a lot of junk volume, so I would say, or I'm doing 4 sets of a lat pull down or whatever. I would say the load I was using for a lot of those sets was almost too high for it was a heavier load, but the intensity wasn't appropriate. So I was doing a weight that I basically shouldn't have been doing. I should have been doing less reps with that weight as just an acclimation, like you called it your primer set, like just a way for me to acclimate so I can get to a real hard, heavy set and then maybe do a back off set. So like right now I'm doing as many, for every exercise it's going to vary, right? Like if I'm deadlifting 405, it's going to be a lot more warm-up sets, acclimation sets going up to it. But if I'm doing a chest press, it might only be 2 warm-up sets, right? So it kind of depends. But I'm basically doing one hard, heavy set at like a 9 or 10 out of 10 intensity, and then one back off set with less load, but keeping the intensity high. So depending on the exercise, you know, I might do a set of 6, like 6 reps on my working set, very, very hard and intense. And then the back off is less weight, still very high intensity. And I might do 8 to 10 reps because I'm using a lighter load, but keeping the intensity high. And I'm only doing 2 working sets per exercise and I'm done.
Listen, I catch myself doing that shit all the time. I mean, like I'm all about low volume and lots of rest days. And then I turn pro, and then Classic Physique is announced. And then I'm trying to be the best Classic Physique competitor on the planet. And it's like, I'm training 7 days a week. I'm just training. Like there was a point in 2000, for the 2016 Olympia, I was a pipsqueak compared to now. I was training like Ronnie. I was training the heaviest weights I've ever moved in my life for like 12 to 15 reps for like 4, 5, 6 sets and like just moving, you know? And it's like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. I can train for like 5 hours. I can train 7 days a week, but I know better. Like I'm just getting over a cold. You guys could hear. And last week when I got sick, I was like, you know, I told my girlfriend, I was like, babe, I gotta stay out of the gym and just get better. So I didn't train for 2 days in a row. That's big for me. The 3rd day, I was like, let me just move a little. I did cardio, abs, and calves. I didn't train. The 4th day, I was sick. It was like the beginning of my cold. I was sick. I was all messed up. I went in and trained legs. I'm like, I'll just do what I can because that was the body part that was up. I had the best leg workout. Even though I was sick, the rest, the amount of rest I had outweighed the sickness. How freaky is that? I ended up getting sicker because I trained legs and I trained back, and it was very taxing. But that rest was needed. What does that tell you? Everyone's like, you know, I ended up eating more and I ended up taking some time off. I'm talking about people that are training hard and dying hard. I'm not talking about people that are eating junk all the time. And they end up looking better, you know? So what Chris, guys, pay attention to this. This is really important. What Chris was saying was the weight that he was using before he was getting to his optimal working weight, the weight that he was using was weakening him. But it was not enough to create growth, right? So if you're pushing 315 as your max set on bench, that's the weight that you're going to grow with. 285, 265, 255, 225, you are not growing at that weight because it is not a new stimulus. Thus, your body's not forced to adapt to it.
For
So
sure.
that's what Chris was saying. And like the way he caught it is that we're always questioning everything. Now, we got that training down, right? So the intensity is what matters, guys. It's not so much you have to do a given number of reps. And then one more thing. What is 8 to 12? What is 4 to 6? I see too many people in the gym going 9, 10, 11, 12. They put the weight down. It should not look like that. 8 to 12 means if you cannot do 8, the weight's too heavy. Put it back, pick a lighter weight. If you can do more than 12, it's too light. So like the last 2 to 3 reps should be very, very difficult. I don't believe in holding the weight and your spine telling you, come on, you got it, and you're just expending energy. Muscle fibers are like a big bowl of cereal. They're in a big bowl, and as you lift weights and even move weights to the bench, they fly away. And that's why we weaken throughout the workout. So that's why you'll see me rolling my 150-pound dumbbells and not carrying them, because you weaken, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was very inefficient with my energy. And that probably cost me just a lot of progress, growth, literally energy and time.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I'm always learning, and I'm taking what I see other people do when it makes sense to me, and it kind of turns that light bulb on. I'm like, all right, let me give this a go. And now I'm making more progress than I have in the past. And more importantly too, I'm just really fucking enjoying training. Like it's nice to say like this exercise I'm getting after for this one set hard, and then I'll back off the load, but still fucking keep the intensity there. But it's 2 hard sets. It's not like, oh, I got to do 4 fucking hard sets of this.
Yeah.
Where it's like you can't go all out 4 sets in a row. Like your performance just drops, on that one specific exercise. I mean, over time, can you build up your strength endurance? Yeah, but to me, right now, this is working well, so I'm enjoying it. And I think a lot of people misunderstand like high volume versus low volume. The other day, I shared Dorian Yates's training log on my IG. And when I shared it on stories, I said, vote if you think this is high volume or low volume. Like 78% or something said it was high volume, but he considers it high intensity, low volume, because he was only doing like 1 to 2 really hard sets. If he is doing, 135 for 10, 225 for 10, 315 for 10, and then 405 is his working set, everything else before that, it was just his acclimation, just warming up. That shit doesn't count,
so
man.
When Dorian came out first with his training, people didn't believe him. They thought he was lying. He said, I trained 2-3 days a week, 30 minutes. There were bouts throughout the year where Dorian trained more like bodybuilders today.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was very low volume, not including the warm-up sets and stuff. But the thing is, one thing that you just said that was really important was like those 2 intense sets. It's not a choice about, should I do more volume than Dorian? Should I do high volume? It's not a choice. If you train 90 to 100%, you cannot train with high volume. What'll happen is you'll have one exercise, like 2 sets where you give 100%, like your children's lives depend on it. You're done. You may be able to train for another 3 hours, but right after that, you drop from, if you're at 100, you drop to 90. If you're at 90, you drop to 80%. I keep going black here. So you're training the rest of the workout. You're training like 65 to 75%.
Yep.
So we only have the mental capacity to train at high intensity for short bouts.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, so we just ran a study here at the University of Tampa that literally just got published like yesterday. So it was on training volume. It was legs only. We had 3 groups. One group was doing 12 sets per week. One group was doing 18 sets per week. One group was doing 24 sets per week. And these are working sets. So the group doing 12 sets per week, 18 sets, and 24 sets, they came in twice per week. So the 12-set group was only doing 6 working sets in one training session. The group that was doing 18 working sets for the week did 9 sets per training session. And the group doing 24 sets was doing 12 working sets per training session. The group that did 24 sets had the worst amount of growth, the least amount of growth, where the groups doing 12 and 18 were extremely similar. And some of the highest responders were in the 12 set per week group. So they were doing low volume, but this is very high intensity. And they were very well trained. It's some of the highest trained people in the literature today.
That's so interesting, man.
Cool, man.
And one thing guys don't realize, we're not growing in the gym. The gym is stressful. It's taxing. It's literally catabolic. You're tearing and breaking down muscle. So you want to keep your training bouts very, very short, but very intense. I don't want to spend too much time because I want to go to the topic at hand, the pride and joy of this show.
Sure.
But one big thing I believe is pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition is going to dictate how much you get out of what you're doing in the gym.
Yeah.
So I want to hear your take on this. Like, what is, pre-workout, intra, and post-workout? Like, I'm a big believer of utilizing insulin, right? And we're not talking about injectable insulin. We're talking about our own healthy, normal, natural producing insulin. And I've noticed that my insulin sensitivity has gone through the roof over the years, and the more muscle mass I have, so I'm a big believer of spiking your insulin not more than an hour and change before you train, having that insulin present while you're training because it's the most anabolic hormone. And also it'll keep you from going catabolic. It keeps away catabolic hormones. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Branch chains through the middle to end of my workout. And then again, spiking my insulin again post-workout. And then I avoid from spiking my insulin throughout the rest of the day.
Yeah, so I think there's probably a few things that we definitely agree on, and then maybe some finer nuances that we might have some different thoughts on. But I think it's super important over the long haul. And I think a lot of people, if you ask people that try to keep up with the literature or some self-proclaimed experts on science, they'll say, well, the data doesn't really support it, and this, that, and the third. But a lot of these studies, man, they might be 8 weeks long or something like that, and you might not be able to see statistically significant changes in 8 weeks, but you damn sure bet you can see that over the course of the entire year, because things start adding up over time. I think having a really good pre-workout meal, what that's going to enable you to do is perform better in the gym and have better strength endurance. And if you're performing better, producing more volume, creating more tension, you're going to create a better growth response over the long haul. You're going to be able to progress better. And then if you're paying attention to intra-workout, that can kind of minimize the catabolic effects of training. It could prolong your energy while you're in the gym. And then if you're optimizing post-workout, it's going to maximize your recovery capabilities, maximize muscle protein synthesis. So I think they're very important. We might approach some things a bit differently, but I think they're very important. If you want me to chat about like first, intra, and then go into post, I can do that.
I mean, there's been times where I did protein and fats versus protein and carbs. When I'm in prep and I'm really in a deficit, to be honest with you, eating carbs and training, it sucks because my insulin spikes and I absolutely crash, and I'm like very sluggish in the gym.
Yep.
Believe it or not, this might sound crazy. I love training fasted.
Mm-hmm.
And after my shows, I try to keep in shape a lot of times, and I'm not so strict and regimented, and I'm eating a little more. A lot of times I train fasted. It's not hard.
Yep.
I have tons of energy. Maybe it'll take 10 minutes to get going. I have a black coffee. I'm very, very mentally focused. I'm strong as an ox, and I last longer.
Yeah.
But, as a bodybuilder, do I think that I'm possibly losing muscle? No, I don't think it's as easy to lose muscle as people think, especially if you're in a caloric surplus throughout the rest of the day. But that being said, do I think it's the best way to become a mass monster and grow in the off season? No. So I don't do it. But like after the last California shows, here and there I was doing it. I had Maria doing it too, my girlfriend.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe how strong and how good of a workout I'm having. I would have assumed that I wouldn't. And you know what's interesting now? She stopped the fasted, and now she's having oatmeal like I do pre-workout. And she's like, when she eats the oatmeal, she's dying of hunger towards the end of her workout and on the way home. Whereas when we trained fasted, I would eat immediately, but I didn't have to. I could have went my cousin just finished like 100-something hours of fasting, like almost 4 days.
Oh, nice.
So I'm a big believer of fasting, intermittent fasting, but for me at this point in my career, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. In the off season, when you are in a calorie surplus and muscle glycogen stores are full and liver glycogen is relatively full, obviously when you're fasted, it's going to be like 50% depleted in the morning. But when your muscle glycogen's full, I really think you should be able to perform well in the gym in your off-season fasted. While you're dieting, I think pre-workout nutrition becomes more important just because you're going to be flat and your ability to perform is going to decrease unless those nutrients are present in your plasma, because you're not going to be able to tap into them as energy reserves. So what I recommend for pre-workout nutrition is utilizing low glycemic carbs. So I would never use something like cream of rice pre-workout. I like a slow digesting carb, like a sweet potato, old-fashioned oats, not like the processed rolled ones. And I also like using multiple transportable carbs. So there's a lot of research, especially in endurance athletes, that shows when you pair something that's primarily glucose-based, so if you take a starchy carbohydrate that's going to break down into glucose, and you pair that with a fruit that is going to break down a lot into fructose, you have different protein transporters that transport those carbs differently. So you're going to be able to handle more carbohydrate in one feeding more efficiently. And by utilizing low glycemic carbs, you're not going to have a spike in blood sugar levels. You're not going to have as large of a spike in insulin as well. Therefore, you're not going to have a crash in blood sugar and in insulin. That's where a lot of people, they literally crash in the gym. They feel fatigued and they can't perform. So I go in depth on this, utilizing all the data in my nutrition ebook that I wrote with Jeff Nippard. And I mean, I think it's extremely valuable to really dial in your pre-workout nutrition. Another thing that people ask is like, how many minutes before my training session should I eat? And this is so variable between each person and the time, the phase that the individual is in. So the food source is definitely going to play a role. But just for example, let's say I ate brown rice and lentils right now. Let's say I had 80 carbs, 20 fat, and 40 protein from like brown rice and lentils and a piece of fruit. And then I had like salmon and whatever. If I eat that meal now, it might take me like 2 hours until I feel like I'm ready to go, because I'm in my improvement season. I'm in a calorie surplus. If I ate that after dieting for 7 weeks, I will be ready to go in 45 minutes, because your body prioritizes digestion. Like,
well, would you ever eat that meal pre-workout?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So again, like right now I would eat that, but I know that, okay, I need to wait 2 hours. I'm not going to go to the gym in 60 minutes.
That's a very interesting meal, man. And this is exactly why I have you on the show. So can you explain why the actual food sources of what you said before? You said a low glycemic carb and a fruit.
Sure.
So like, what is an example? Like what carb and what fruit?
Sure. So literally sometimes right now I do like old-fashioned oatmeal with a little bit of like almond butter or some sort of fat source that's going to further slow down digestion a bit. And then I would pair it with fruit. It could be raisins, it could be banana, it can be it. And it also kind of depends, man. Like if I know I'm training later on, I'll have something more fibrous like an apple. If I know I'm training in like 60 minutes, I'll have something that digests faster like a banana. So it really does vary. You could add some honey in there as well. There's some fructose in honey. And it depends, man. It can be whey protein with the oatmeal, something I want it to digest a bit quicker but still be low glycemic. Or if I'm having like a whole food meal, it can be brown rice and lentils with some sort of protein, some sort of vegetable or fruit, and I'm ready to rock. So there's a lot of different options. I don't think there's like a secret sauce, so to speak, but yeah, man, it depends on like the timing, the phase I'm in. But I never utilize.
It's very interesting. Sounds like a very hearty, wholesome meal.
Yeah.
You know, I always keep it really basic. I like oatmeal. I even blend my oatmeal because I just feel like it sits in my stomach better and digests better. So I don't want a carb. I agree. Cream of rice is way too fast absorbing for pre-workout. Yeah. I want a carb that's a little bit slower and satiating and will last me through my workout. I've been doing oatmeal and I've been pureeing my chicken and putting it in there. It's like baby food. Post-workout, for sure, I think you're going to absorb that chicken faster. It's like chewing the food for you. You know what I mean?
For sure.
It's taking one step of digestion out of the equation.
Absolutely.
I definitely agree with adding in some fats to slow the digestion of the carbs, especially if you have long training sessions. But I've always believed in having foods that don't take too long to pass through. Like I wouldn't have a steak. Salmon, I think, is good. It's very interesting. You know, it's a good fat source. I never did that. I know Danny, you know Danny Hester, the guy that beat me the first year in Classic Physique?
Yeah.
Danny's my boy. He's awesome. He's been around the block for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Danny's always eating salmon. I always see him eating salmon. He even has it before shows backstage.
Oh yeah, man. I love salmon. I get salmon burgers from Costco. They're so easy to prep. They're 4 ounces a piece, so I don't have to weigh it out and deal with this.
How much fat?
9 grams of fat, 20 grams of protein per 4 ounces. So I usually do 6 ounces with that meal. Because I'm getting other protein from like the lentils or whatever. So it's probably like 45 grams of protein total.
I gotta pick those up. I'm a big salmon believer.
It's super easy to prep too.
Is it wild? Is it wild?
Wild caught, man.
Okay, great.
And
all right, so let's move on. Let's move on to Natty versus Enhanced, right? So natural bodybuilding versus enhanced bodybuilding.
Yeah. There's
so many misconceptions in my eyes. And, you know, people are always asking me, well, I'm natural. Can I do this? But I'm natural. Can I train like this? And, you know, for me personally, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Not much changed. You know, I anyone that knows me or follows me, you know, my goal was to be the best natural bodybuilder on the planet. That's just what, and I don't think it's possible. I don't know if it was possible genetically, but that was my goal. Yeah. I started playing around with dumbbells at like 12 years old. I was a full-blown bodybuilder by 14, 15. I had pictures of me at 16. I could have done team bodybuilding, but I didn't have anyone that competed around me. I never knew about competing. I just wanted to be the best I could be. And then I was like, you know, I want to do the Hercules. I want to do the universe. And I started realizing that at the higher levels, a lot of these guys aren't exactly honest. And that I don't respect. If you're going to be natural, be natural. Don't try to bend the rules, you know? So when it came time for me to compete, I ended up going to the NPC and doing men's physique, which I didn't love, but that's just where I was. Yeah. But you know, my approach to nutrition was pretty much the same. My approach to nutrition changed usually prep to prep and year by year because I change. But my training style was the same. I used to train very, very heavy, low volume. I used to eat pretty much the same like we're talking now. Not much changed. And I don't necessarily think that you can do such a crazy higher amount of volume just because you're enhanced. I think it all goes hand in hand. I think like the thing is most natural young guys are like amateur or below amateur level. They don't even compete. And then they're comparing what they do and themselves to the top enhanced athletes of the world. Yeah. It's like, you know, it makes no sense. These guys, enhanced or not, they're 20 years ahead of you with the best genetics in the world. Sure. A lot of IFBB pros, a lot of my own friends, you know, I kind of like don't believe in everything that they do. A lot of guys at that level, it's not like a lot of them are, in our eyes, might be making some mistakes or overtraining. Sure. Or they could be better if they did X, Y, Z, but they are where they are because they worked their asses off and they're willing to do and sacrifice so much more, you know? Like, guys, before I ever competed and I was natural, I wasn't a competitive bodybuilder, but like I sacrificed so much of my life for the love of bodybuilding. Yeah. So
and it's the same on this side where it's like some of the best, they're genetically blessed. A lot of them aren't necessarily doing things in the most optimal evidence-based scientific fashion. They probably could be better if they were doing things differently, but they've put in 20 years. They train harder than the person complaining about it. And they're doing enough right to build the physique. You know, time and like building muscle as a advanced athlete is like watching, you know, paint dry on the wall. It's a slow freaking process. You need to have patience. And like for the kids growing up that the society, like instant gratification is like what people live for. Like bodybuilding is not for you, you know? No. Yeah.
You have to do something repetitively, day in, day out, not see any results and just have faith that it's going to give you the outcome you want. It's kind of like rolling the dice. But one huge thing for me is it's the psychological aspect, I believe. The psyche of a natural bodybuilder versus an enhanced bodybuilder. I'm gonna delve into that in a second. But what do you think like the huge differences here. Like I get so many questions and comments they make no sense.
Sure.
And I think a lot of these guys, I see guys on Instagram commenting on, oh, you only look like that because of steroids. Okay, hold on a second. Forget the fact that you're disrespecting somebody you don't even know and that you shouldn't talk like that on social media. In my opinion, they're screwing themselves. Because if they're seeing someone that's muscular and further ahead in progression than they are and saying that's not possible unless you take drugs, then what they're saying to themselves is they can never get there without drugs. And now look, I'm not talking about Ronnie Coleman. No one's getting there with or without drugs, right?
Sure.
Ronnie is Ronnie.
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is guys will say that to anyone that looks good. I got very, very far naturally, and everyone doubted me. Everyone in my gym, the owners of my gym, if I post pictures today of when I was natural, people still say, oh, you can't get like that without gear. And the funny thing is the pictures that I would post, I'm literally like, the biggest I was really lean was about $190 and change, which is pretty good, but it's not massive at 5'10.5". And I look like I'm 20 years old, but I was 35 years old.
Yeah, I was a very impressive physique, man. I would have loved to see you compete in these other orgs, the natural orgs back then, and I think you would have smashed it. I think you would have been a top pro for sure.
I appreciate it. I almost think I'm a big fan of natural bodybuilding. I'm a big fan of natural bodybuilders. I think they're very smart and intellectual. Not to say that enhanced aren't, but I just feel like when you're natural, you're either a genetic freak, which we're not talking about genetic freaks, right? We're talking about the masses. We're not talking about the 1%ers. I don't give a shit about you guys. Yeah. You guys grow no matter what, enhanced or not, you're blessed. But everybody else, if you're not super smart, you're not going to grow and advance as a natural bodybuilder. So I see a lot of guys that are enhanced that aren't doing their homework and could be so much better. But, they gain some puff and they gain some muscle rapidly and they just keep making the same mistakes. Whereas me, natural bodybuilding was like a starving person hunting for food. I was constantly looking and turning over every stone I could find to figure out this secret,
I love it, man.
And I did so much freaking research, and staying natural for that many years, in my opinion, is what made me as smart as I am today. So what do you have to say? Let me let you talk here. What do you have to say on this topic? What comes to mind?
It just depends, like what specifics you want to chat about. I think both sides of the sport can learn from one another. I think I think if you're too far on one side of the spectrum with your beliefs, you would likely benefit by shifting over a little bit to that middle area and adopting some of the other things going on over here. You'll probably benefit from. So like what I'm trying to say is I'm generalizing, which I don't like to do, but the natural bodybuilding community in general, they try to be extremely evidence-based and scientific. And I think it really has taken away from the creativity and the art and the thinking in a different manner, where it's like, I need to sculpt my body. That a lot of the bro bodybuilders or the enhanced bodybuilders, I still think they have that thought process, which I like. I don't think we have that on the natural side, and that bothers me. And like, just for example, we reduce a lot of exercise selection. Sometimes what I see from the natural bodybuilders is they'll say something like, oh, if you do a horizontal row, you don't need to do any other like horizontal pulling movement. And like, or if you do a horizontal row, you don't need to do a rear delt exercise because you're hitting your rear delts when you're doing a horizontal row. It's like, well, that's not necessarily true. It depends how you're rowing. So just for example, if I did a close grip cable row and I'm rowing to my belly button and my glenohumeral joint, my upper arm is moving through extension, I'm really training my lats and I'm training my rhomboids a bit and my mid traps. But I'm not training my rear delts at all unless my elbows are up here. So if I'm moving through horizontal abduction, this is still a horizontal row, and they're not created equal. So I think
do you think the natural guys are doing more or less volume? Do you think they're doing higher volume or they're keeping it low?
Way lower, much lower volume. And I think I think sometimes they're obsessed with the big three, like barbell squats, barbell bench, and deadlifts. This whole power building trend is definitely more popular on the natural side than it is on the enhanced side. I think there's tons of benefits to utilizing machines, especially depending on your structure, what's built well for you. But man, I think the art of bodybuilding has been a little bit lost on the natural side. And then on the enhanced side, I feel like they've just kind of got stuck in their ways and they haven't like looked to change their thought process or learn something new or experiment with something new. And they're just continuously doing the same shit. And unfortunately, I think the biggest differences between like the golden era and now is the golden era was focused on training and nutrition, and the enhancement was just like the cherry on top. It wasn't the driver. They weren't using that to move the needle. They were using that to facilitate their training and their nutrition.
Yeah.
On the natural side, all we have is training and nutrition. On the enhanced side, it seems like there's less focus on training and nutrition, and they're trying to move the needle by experimenting with different, supplements, super supplements, and they're not focused on the things that actually are going to really move that needle, be the driver.
Just because you're making progress doesn't mean you're not doing something incorrect, or you could do something better. So like the fact that you said the natural guy's doing less volume, I'm very happy to hear that, because I'm a big believer of rest and not a lot of volume. I have seen that trend with I think it's just more of like fit. I don't know, like that bench press squat. Like it's maybe more like how CrossFitters say we could do more stuff, not just a goon bodybuilder, But for me personally, I built my frame naturally bodybuilding, just like all the enhanced guys, because that's who I watched and looked up to. I just didn't do a lot of volume. But that being said, the natural guys say, well, they can do more volume, the enhanced guys. The enhanced guys are doing double the volume. They're doing a lot more volume, and they're making progress. But if they did less volume, would they make more progress? And my opinion is yes. So I don't think that crazy volume is correct just because they're able to get away with it.
Sure.
I just think that when you're natural, you can't get away with it. So there's no choice.
Yeah, man, I'm a big believer in quality over quantity. And kind of to like piggyback off what you're saying, just because you're progressing doesn't mean that you wouldn't make more progress. Even if you were doing less total work, if the work was more efficient and higher quality work. And there's a really important concept kind of going back to the volume thing that Dr. Mike Israetel always talks about. There's a minimal effective dose. There's a minimal stimulus. There's a minimal volume, minimal work, minimal stimulus that you need to elicit a positive response, right? Doing more work, having more stimulus will lead to more growth to a certain point. And then the amount of work and the amount of stimulus becomes too hard to recover from. It's too much of a stimulus. It's over your MRV, he calls it, maximum recoverable volume. And then you actually start to regress because you're doing too much work. So the quality needs to be there first, and then quantity needs to go up over time, but there's only so much we can handle. I think on the enhanced side, perhaps they're still progressing, even though they're doing too much, because their ability to recover is enhanced due to the enhancement, and they're still in like a net positive, but their net positive would be much greater if they weren't beating themselves to shit or doing a lot of junk volume.
I don't want to get into like crazy detail with like compounds, but like, yeah, when you're enhanced, you recover faster. But in my opinion, sleep and food is more important than the anabolics, because we're not talking about peptides and GH and all that stuff. That stuff might make you recover faster. I'm not an advocate of that stuff. I think it's terrible. I think it could lead to cancerous cells growing and all that stuff. But just anabolics, just the stuff that Arnold and them were using, I mean, I don't think that your ability to recover is going to be that much greater if you're training intense. When I trained chest like 3 days ago, it's still very tender to the touch, man. Like, I'm still sore. I mean, I can go in and train chest again tomorrow, but I know better. I know not to,
Yeah.
One thing I want to say that I've noticed, I want to get your take on this. I don't know how many people you worked with enhanced, but I feel like when you're natural, your drugs are food. And what I noticed with a lot of my clients is that my natural guys eat a lot more energy sources.
Mm.
So a lot of the enhanced guys borderline starve themselves. And I don't think that's correct, but like to get really, really lean, like the natural guy is the best conditioning ever. When you don't have anabolics, you get a certain dry, crisp conditioning that you don't get with anabolics, especially this day and age. In the 90s, they did, but today they don't. And if they do, it's with a lot of diuretics for the most part. But what I've noticed is the natural guys are eating 200-300 grams of carbs while dieting.
Yeah.
You don't see that unless you're talking about like Ronnie or really heavy guys. You don't see that much on the enhanced side. I see guys enhanced not getting that grainy leanness unless they go sub 100 grams carbs. Of course, the carb cycling.
Sure.
But that's what I've seen personally firsthand, especially working with natural. I work with a lot of natural athletes, and I have a lot of enhanced athletes as well. What do you agree with that?
I agree with a lot of what you just said. I honestly think the biggest reason why, though, is the rates of loss during the contest prep and the timeline of their contest prep. So I think a lot of enhanced people, they need to lose a lot more weight in a shorter period of time to get into true stage condition. And I think they have a shorter contest prep because they're relying on drugs to speed up fat loss, which I think is very, very foolish.
It's the worst.
So they're forced to eat less food when they actually in reality should be able to handle more food. The truth of the matter is I think they really need to extend their timeline of contest prep, diet slower and steadier.
What's your ideal timeline?
It depends on how much weight you have to lose, man. So, if you're someone who keeps it super tight and you're 20 pounds over stage weight, I think you can contest prep for 14 to 16 weeks and be great. But if you have 40 pounds to lose and you want to do that in 16 weeks, you're just not going to look good.
Because I think that 12-week prep stuff is bullshit. Look, if you're ripped, if you're ripped all year round, you don't even need 12 weeks. You could do it less. But like for me, first of all, I'm not one of those guys that say rip all the time. I put on weight and I put on some fluff. This is the leanest I've been in my off season. Now I'm about 240 and change. I've never been this hard and lean at this weight. But in the past, I would put on some weight. My prep for the Olympia was over 4 months. And then I was actually prepping for like 7 because I kept competing. And I just got better and better and better, So go ahead.
One thing I wanted to ask you, it's a little bit personal, but do you think besides, because I saw that you got better and better as the season went on. I think one factor is obviously time. You just have more time to chip away at your adipose tissue. So you're going to get leaner and leaner when you just continuously do what you need to do. One thing I wanted to ask you was mentally, obviously the Olympia has to be the most pressure, right? And then those shows later on in the season have to be less pressure. Do you feel like you started to respond better to protocols just because stress was lower? Were you more stressed going into the O compared to
I try not to overthink and get too crazy. When I turned pro, I never let it get to my head. When I got on the Olympia, I just look at them all as the same.
Sure.
I was better for the Olympia. I know a lot of people aren't going to agree, but what I'm talking about is my physique around Olympia time was the best it's ever been. I was the biggest, hardest, and most well-rounded with Arnold's conditioning. But making weight and peaking has proven to be hard for Arash Rahbar. And I didn't look good, man. I don't want to say I looked like shit and talk bad about myself, but I've said that many times. I even told Steve Weinberger I looked like shit. And he said, no, you didn't. But at prejudging in 2019 Olympia, I didn't look good. I didn't look conditioned, and I'm telling you, I was one of the most conditioned guys in the show. I was diced. I have videos, no pictures, no filters. I have videos of me training in that dark gym in Vegas. I actually it's a shoot with Revive days before. I looked incredible.
Yeah.
I think I was a little bigger and harder for the Olympia than I was for those other Cali shows. So I don't think I was better for those shows. I just peaked better.
So you peaked better, sure.
Yeah, but also, I mean, this is a whole nother show. We should do one together for peak week. But what I've learned is for me, I can be full on 0 carbs with just water and salt. So I lose. Like for guys that don't know and that don't follow me, you better start following me. I lose like over 10 pounds the day before a show. So putting that weight back in and not looking soft or shitty is tough. So you're always rehydrating and carbing up. And that's not, doesn't work for me, man. Carbs, water, and salt, they end up sticking together. If you don't have salt, then your blood pressure is low, and then you can't hold the carb in the muscle, and it leaks. So for me, the most important thing is rehydrating. I need to pound like a gallon of water after weigh-in and not eat anything. Wait till that water absorbs and then start slowly carbing up. So I carbed up the most for the Olympia, more than 2 days. I carbed up less for the second show that in California that I lost. It was the Ultimate Warrior. I lost to an IFBB Classic competitor. Of course, he was classic. He was competing with me. He's a friend of mine, good guy, Danny Uden. And then the next week, I carbed up the least amount. I barely carbed up. I had like 2 or 3 small carb meals, and I beat Danny. I did exactly what the judges said. They said, listen, it was very close. He beat you here, you beat him there. He beat you here. Your backside was great, but you were a little watery. So I just came in drier and sharper. Not drier by cutting water, by drinking more water.
Yeah.
We have to do a whole show on
peak
week, on contest prep peak week. There is no true protocol, but
so how much weight did you lose for like a 16-week prep, like going into that? Like where did you start at and where did you end at?
So I gotta look at my notes for Olympia. I don't remember what I weighed. I can easily weigh like naturally. I went up to 255 pounds. It was sloppy though. I was eating 8,000 calories. That just goes to show, like, I'm in my off season. My low carb days were 50 carbs. I just brought them up to like 70, 80.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like 240, 245. Bro, when I was eating 8,000 calories and I was natural, I was eating like 500 grams of protein, 1,000 grams of carbs. If I ate that now, I would be like 300 pounds. I can't eat as much now, you know? I get so big. So I don't remember the amount of weight, but it's a lot. Like, let's just call it 240 to 215.
Okay.
So it's 25 pounds. The thing is, I never get down to 215. I'm like ready to compete pretty dry and hard and lean in the 220s.
Yeah.
So I'm always losing roughly 10 pounds the last like 2 days. And, you know, it's water. You can lose in the sauna. I've learned that I can lose a solid 7 pounds within a 3-hour in and out session with a rubber suit in the sauna, but it's brutal. It drains the muscle as well as subcutaneous water.
Yeah, and it increases cortisol, so then your ability to actually absorb those carbs once they do come in are going to be
You know what I've noticed also, you know, it's really good to be smart with your diet and carb cycle and have really low carb bouts with higher fat and higher carb and always change. I believe that's very important. There's been times where I did these stupid diets of just same food for like 3 months, low carb, low calorie, and you just kill your body. So what I noticed is that after the shows, when I go off and I eat a bit for a few days and then I get back on a strict diet, I look bananas in like 2 weeks. And of course my weight is a big factor. It's not fair to compare because I weigh more, but I feel like doing a carb up or maybe even a cheat meal, although, what is that?
I got a phone call.
We're seeing all your texts. Sorry, bro. I got.
No, I just texted you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No problem. So what I noticed was what I think is that when I push myself, for me particularly, someone that has to lose a lot of weight, I push myself so hard for 4 months that before the show, I need to take a break. I need to like maybe not train for a day and just eat and let myself come to life. This is just a thought and theory that I had this time around because I go so hard. Dude, when you're that depleted and you did cardio and training and caloric deficit for so many months, you're not bouncing back and making every muscle in your body, especially the big ones, back and legs. You're not filling them back up in 2 days.
Yeah. Unless you're going crazy ham. And your bigger body parts and your weaker body parts take the biggest hit. And for me, that's my legs, you know? Yeah, for sure.
All right, so your phone's blowing up, and I know you got something important coming up. We're going on an hour. Chris, I can't thank you enough, man. It was a pleasure having you on the show. The fact that we're able to talk so much on just 2 topics just shows the energy and the synergy here. We got to do this again.
For sure.
Guys, comment below what you want to hear Chris and I speak about next time, and we'll be sure to answer your questions. Chris, where can they find you, your social media, and where can they get that ebook?
Sure. So you can find me at Christopher.Barakat on Instagram. And then the ebook is at www.schoolofgains.com. Gains is with a Z. And yeah, definitely check out my stuff. And I really appreciate you having me on, man.
It was my pleasure, brother. I appreciate your time. I look forward to it soon. Guys, make sure to follow Chris. I'll put the links down below. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, my man. Talk to you soon.
Right.
Later.
Bye.